thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? Yes? Okay. And I'm just gonna get used to the clicker here. Perfect. So today I'm gonna be talking about the disparities in women's health and femtech. And just to give you guys a bit of background, as Michelle mentioned, my name is Lanna. I'm the co-founder and CEO of AIMA. It's a femtech company. It means bloody in Greek because I'm half Greek, and we thought it would be a punny way to talk about period pain, a very taboo subject. And I'll talk more about AIMA later, but this is why we started AIMA and how we got to where we are now. So despite women actually representing more than half of the population, the resources for us in the medical community are very low. There is a massive disparity between what is actually being done to help us with our health problems. But why is that? It's called the gender pain gap. The gender pain gap is when women, our pain, our health conditions, our diseases are ignored in favor for men. It's a systemic and gender bias that is at the heart of every issue in women's health. And as you can see some examples here, I'll go through them. So a study done by norepinephrine, which is a drug in the UK, actually put together a very consistent and very good gender pain gap index, where they interviewed their patients, thousands of patients, and here were the results. 56% of women found that their pain was not heard versus 49% of men. This is correlated in a study in the UK that looked at two things. First, they had men and women go to an emergency room complaining of the exact same abdominal pain. And as you can see, women waited 65 minutes in the emergency room, men waited 49 minutes. Men were given an analgesic or painkiller for their pain. Women were given an antidepressant for theirs. This is the gender pain gap. But why is this happening? How did we get to this moment particularly? Well, through the knowledge and trust gap. So the knowledge gap, and this hasn't been developed by me, this idea of the knowledge and trust gap has actually been put together by Maya Dusenberry, who was the author of Feministing and Bitch Media. She wrote a book called Doing Harm where she explored this idea based on her experience. And I'm using it here to describe it to you guys today. So this is not me coming up with anything original. The knowledge gap is when we don't understand women's diseases, health conditions, and the outcomes of that because we've never studied it. We don't know. For example, with a pain like endometriosis, endometriosis is a severe problem. 1 out of 10 women experience this. It's been listed in the UK as top 20 the most painful diseases in the world. And we don't know the cause. We can guess, but we actually have no science behind it at all. Same thing with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. 1 out of 10 women suffer from it, yet 50% of them don't show any signs or symptoms, and we have no idea why. There's a lack of research here that's not being done. We can't explain it. So how are we giving solutions to people like myself who have PCOS to manage our pain? Interestingly, 70% of women experience chronic pain, but 80% of studies are done on men and male mice. How does that make sense? It doesn't. And so, let me explain. This is crazy. Interestingly, as an example, when birth control was developed and becoming more popularized in the 90s and 2000s, what they realized is that there were severe side effects and drug interactions with birth control that they had never tested because it had been tested on men. So they had to pull most of the product off the market and test in women. This is the knowledge gap. We don't know anything. These are my two favorite, to be honest, of the knowledge gap. This happens in research. So as you can see, in 1986, they wanted to look at obesity and the effects on uterine and breast cancer. They tested all on men who didn't have a uterus. That's an issue. Another one, of course, heart disease. This is becoming more well known now. A famous doctor in the UK said, we know if a woman is having a heart attack because they show up dead. The signs are totally different for women than for men. And the study done that says to take a daily aspirin, all on men, no women. So we don't actually know if that's helpful for us or harmful. Next is the trust gap. There's a great quote from Maya Dusenberry from her book. But let's start off by when you go to a doctor, studies have said if you present as a woman in a clinic and say, I have pain, they tell you it's in your head. They associate it with psychological symptoms versus physical symptoms. Even if the tests are showing that there is something physically wrong, they still give you an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication, where men get analgesics. And I just wanted to point out here, because I have the opportunity, that Prozac is at the top there, but the bottom is Serafem. They're the exact same drug. One was marketed for women, the pink and purple, and the other for men. They actually don't know the side effects for Prozac in women, and they're only now doing those studies. So if doctors aren't trusting us to tell them what's wrong, and they don't know, how are we finding solutions then? How do we know what works for us and what doesn't, especially when it comes to pain? And so we take a look at the research. What has been going on? What leaps are we making, and where can we fill in gaps, especially as female founders? Well, in 1993, it was the first time that women and minorities could participate in clinical trials with the FDA and NIH. Canada came in 1997 to do that. Then we have in 1997 to 2001 where they pulled 80% of drugs because women were having side effects to normal everyday medication that previously no one cared about until we started looking. And then finally, my favorite one, there's been 5 times more funding for erectile dysfunction than PMS, something that over 90% of women experience every single month. Think about that. How much more money do we need to study one blue pill? But we know nothing of PMS, something that's so debilitating that people have suicidal ideations called PMDD related to PMS. What's shocking is that even though women and minorities are allowed in clinical trials now, they don't need to report the research, meaning if we participate in these trials, we don't need to look at gender. We're still invisible, so we don't know side effects of major drugs like Ambien. So what about endometriosis, PCOS, fibroid cysts, things that happen to women or people who are born with a uterus? What about those? Well, period pain isn't normal. And as I mentioned, 1 out of 10 women experience PCOS and endometriosis, severe debilitating diseases that can make you infertile that are lifelong. For PCOS, they tell you to lose weight and to go on anti-anxiety drugs. For endometriosis, a lot of patients are sectioned because the pain is that bad and not believed. Period pain can be equivalent to a heart attack, and yet we're still not believing women and their pain. And so the only 3 current treatment options that we've offered, that we've studied, and by the way, NSAIDs have not been studied for period pain, okay, so if you're taking an Advil, they actually don't know, are NSAIDs, hormonal contraceptives, and opioids. And yet, interestingly, 30% of women and people who menstruate do not respond to Advil for their period pain, but it is the #1 prescribed and recommended thing by doctors. So why aren't there alternative solutions to this? How have we not dug into the research to look for more? Just some more on period pain and endometriosis. And what this causes too, and I think the women in the room and the men who have wives and daughters that suffer understand this causes a low quality of life. This means a job loss. This means a loss of a social circle, a loss of economics, a loss of a partner. This is whole impacting. It's a whole body problem, not just one aspect of our lives once a month. This affects us the whole time. And now to touch on something that I think most people forget is that race and socioeconomic status majorly play into this. So the New England Journal reported that there is a health crisis and racism crisis in the system right now. Women are not, Black women especially, are not given pain medication when they go in to see a physician. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Peach Corps in New York. We specialize in endometriosis, PCOS, adenomyosis, pain, pelvic pain. And the founder on that has been sectioned multiple times, going into an emergency room trying to get drugs for her pain to be managed because she's Black. And that's the reality if you're BIPOC. And that's exactly what the studies say. So it's even harder if you're not a white woman or a man. And so where does that leave us? What can we do? Well, there's femtech. And that's where we can come up and fill these gaps. We know that this is happening, so we can do something about it. But 4% of research is only done on women's health. And last year, Bayer cut their funding for women's health. In a way, this is shocking and awful. But in another way, this is great. This gives us an opportunity to create a narrative that people like who run Bayer, who are men, don't. We can see the gaps and start to create something new. But only 2% of femtech founders are funded. 2%. 98%, the rest are all men. But we've been lucky at AIMA. We've had the backing of IndieBio New York, who saw something in us. And just to give you an idea, we're not an easy company to deal with. We have a patent-pending formulation in cannabinoids, okay, cannabis, which is a Schedule I drug equivalent to heroin right now. And when I asked Steve, who's the managing director of IndieBio, why he took us on, why he invested in us, it's because he has 3 daughters who have period pain. And he can see and understand that need specifically. Have we gotten funding since then? Not really. It's been a tough gig. And he's pissed about it. He told me to come here and rage about how it's not going. Even femtech VCs do not want to invest in femtech because the landscape is unknown. We have to do all of the research. We have to fund for that research, and that makes it really difficult. Who wants to pay for that? There are people, though. So one way that we've gone about this, and I know this is extremely controversial, and you don't need to agree or disagree with me, and that's fine, but we started the paid period leave petition as a form of advocacy to have our voices heard and to create some education around period pain. Do I think this will go through the House of Commons? It's being tabled next week. I don't know. But it gives us an opportunity to talk about solutions and options out there and educate ourselves and our employers and our partners and husbands and fathers about what we experience. And so, to close, if you are a person who experiences period pain or any type of pelvic pain, know a few things. You know your body like nobody else. Doctors are human beings. They're going to make mistakes. They're not going to understand. That's okay. There are groups online that can help you build community, which allow you to innovate. Once you tap into those communities, you can hear what's missing and start to think of ideas as to how to connect the dots. And finally, womanhood should not be synonymous with pain. It's not normal. And that's it. Thank you.